In the heart of Burkina Faso's central highlands, a silent volcano that had slept for millennia suddenly awakened not with fire, but with the gleam of diamond. On September 7th, 2025, during what was meant to be a routine gold exploration, a team of Burkinabe engineers and Chinese specialists detected anomalous geological signals in the Samgande volcanic zone. Magnetic irregularities, density distortions, and subsurface echoes, unlike anything recorded before. Satellite confirmation soon revealed vast clusters of crystalline structures embedded deep within the volcanic crust. Within hours, President Ibrahim Traoré addressed the nation beneath the banner of African sovereignty. "This is not a miracle," he said. "It is a message that Africa still holds treasures for those who dare to look beneath her soil." Geologically, the discovery makes sense. Diamonds form under extreme heat and pressure in the mantle carried upward through ancient volcanic pipes. But politically, its meaning runs deeper. For the first time, Burkina Faso wasn't the object of discovery, it was the discoverer. From my perspective, this moment transcends geology. It is a test of sovereignty, a confrontation with centuries of extraction and dependency. Because a diamond, after all, doesn't just reflect light, it reflects power. And this time, Burkina Faso intends that light to shine from within its own soil, not from foreign vaults. The Samgande volcano sits quietly in the central highlands of Burkina Faso, a rugged plateau, long dismissed by foreign surveys as barren and unprofitable. Its dry soil and sparse vegetation offered little promise, and in the eyes of the global mining industry, it was simply a blank spot on the map. But as history often reminds us, blank spaces are where revolutions begin. The discovery began not in a laboratory but in the field, with Burkinabe geologists operating old Chinese drones and refurbished ground-penetrating scanners on a gold survey mission. At first, the data looked wrong: erratic magnetic spikes, unpredictable density shifts, equipment interference, someone noted. Yet when the same readings reappeared at different altitudes, curiosity replaced doubt. Traoré's government authorized satellite verification. Within hours, orbital imagery confirmed something unprecedented: a kimberlite pipe tens of kilometers wide, rich in crystalline formations. In geological terms, this was the kind of deposit that changes not just economies, but eras. From my analysis, the symbolism is unavoidable. A long, dormant volcano now yielding the hardest substance known to man, discovered by one of the world's poorest nations. Nature itself seemed to echo Traoré's political thesis that potential buried under pressure can one day break through the crust of neglect. Burkina Faso's volcano did not erupt with fire. It erupted with proof that the ground beneath forgotten nations still holds enough force to rewrite their destiny. When the announcement was made, the streets of Ouagadougou transformed overnight. From markets to military barracks, from classrooms to farms, the reaction was the same: disbelief turning into pride. Crowds gathered in public squares, waving flags, chanting, "Our soil, our wealth." The national broadcaster replayed Traoré's declaration every hour. What was once a forgotten plateau had suddenly become a symbol of hope, unity, and defiance. Within 48 hours, the state moved decisively. Helicopters and reconnaissance drones were deployed to secure the Samgande region. Military engineers established perimeter zones and surveillance posts. No foreign journalist or corporation was allowed near the site. For the first time in Burkina Faso's modern history, a natural resource was being treated not as a contract, but as a national asset under military protection. From my perspective, this rapid mobilization was not just about defending a mine. It was about defending a narrative. Traoré understood that whoever controls the story of a discovery controls its destiny. By locking down access early, Burkina Faso ensured that this time the story would not begin with foreign company discoverers, but with Burkinabe scientists confirm. The mood inside the country was electric. Soldiers saluted geologists, students volunteered for field research, and farmers spoke of planting in diamond soil. The diamond, once a metaphor for Western luxury, had become a symbol of African dignity. And in that symbolism lay the first spark of a movement far larger than any gemstone. The shockwave didn't stop at the borders of Burkina Faso. It rippled across continents. Within hours of the announcement, global commodity markets shuddered. The mere phrase "largest diamond deposit ever discovered" was enough to send De Beers stock down 3% in 2 days, while European analysts called emergency briefings to assess potential instability in the Sahel. In Paris, the reaction was a mix of skepticism and unease. French media outlets questioned the discovery's authenticity, but also warned that Traoré's rhetoric of sovereignty threatens the balance of influence in West Africa. Washington was more diplomatic, urging transparency in extraction practices. But behind the diplomatic language was a clear signal: the West had not expected this. Meanwhile, in Beijing and Moscow, tone and timing shifted. Both nations sent delegations of geologists and defense advisors to Ouagadougou within a week, not to control, but to observe. Their message was subtle but strategic. Africa has every right to develop its own wealth. From my analysis, this was no longer a geological discovery, it was a geopolitical event. Burkina Faso, a landlocked state of 22 million, had just forced the world to look down at Africa again. This time, not as a charity case, but as a strategic epicenter. Traoré, fully aware of the moment, framed the discovery not as luck, but as justice. For centuries, they mined our soil and called it progress. Today, we mine our soil and call it independence. And perhaps that is what truly unsettled the old powers, not the diamonds themselves, but the audacity of a small nation claiming the right to define what they mean. In the days following the announcement, Ibrahim Traoré moved quickly to transform excitement into structure. Standing before the National Assembly, he unveiled what he called the 4 pillars of resource sovereignty, a strategic doctrine meant to ensure that the diamond discovery would not repeat the tragedy of Africa's past. First, technology. Burkina Faso would establish its own National Geological Data Center and use AI-driven 3D mapping to manage the mine's operations. "We will know every meter of our soil," Traoré said, "before anyone else does." Second, education. He announced the creation of the Burkina Mining Academy, an institution to train engineers, metallurgists, and environmental scientists, designed to end the cycle of dependency on foreign consultants. Third, sovereignty. No foreign entity would be allowed to hold more than 20% equity in any strategic mineral project. Licensing and sales would remain fully under state control. Fourth, sustainability. For every ton extracted, a fixed percentage of profits would go to reforestation, community infrastructure, and renewable energy. From my perspective, this is where Traoré's genius lies, in turning resource wealth into a political philosophy. He is not selling diamonds. He is forging identity. "We will not trade our soil for paper," he declared. "Our wealth will not come from contracts, but from consciousness." And in those words, Burkina Faso's diamonds ceased to be mere stones. They became a curriculum in sovereignty, a blueprint for how nations can mine dignity from beneath centuries of control. Barely 3 weeks after the announcement, President Traoré convened an extraordinary summit in Ouagadougou. Around the table sat delegates from Mali, Niger, Ghana, Congo, and Chad, each representing nations long exploited for their minerals, yet united by a shared frustration. Africa owned the resources, but not the rules. That day, Traoré proposed a bold framework, the Pan-African Strategic Resources Consortium, PASRC. Its mission, simple but revolutionary, was to pool expertise, coordinate prices, and defend ownership of Africa's strategic minerals, much as OPEC had done for oil. They divided us mine by mine, Traoré said. We will unite resource by resource. In practical terms, the consortium's charter included data sharing on geological surveys, collective bargaining for export rates, and a joint fund to finance local refineries and defense of key sites. Mali offered its engineers, Ghana offered laboratory capacity, and Congo pledged logistical corridors to the Atlantic. Western analysts dismissed it as symbolic populism. But for many Africans, symbolism was precisely what had been missing. For the first time since the fall of colonial empires, resource diplomacy was being written in African capitals, not European ones. From my perspective, this marks the beginning of Africa's mineral multilateralism, a doctrine that replaces extraction with negotiation and dependence with partnership. If successful, PAS-RC could evolve into a continental OPEC for precious metals and rare earths, a quiet revolution unfolding, not in battlefields, but in boardrooms where the tables have finally turned. At dawn, the Somgande volcano no longer looked like a relic of the past. It looked like the beginning of one. Under the pale gold of the morning sky, soldiers guarded drilling sites, engineers ran seismic checks, and miners raised the Burkina Faso flag over the crater's rim. The air carried the scent of dust and diesel, but also something less tangible: belief. President Traoré stood before the nation once more, his tone neither triumphant nor boastful, but resolute. They once took our diamonds to adorn their crowns. Now we will use them to build our own future. Those words crystallized the meaning of everything that had unfolded. This discovery was not just about gemstones or geology. It was about the end of invisibility. For centuries, Africa's soil had been measured only by what it could export. Now, it was being measured by what it could create. From my perspective, this marks a turning point in modern African history, where land ceases to be collateral and becomes capital, where resources cease to be plundered and become purpose. Of course, challenges remain: economic retaliation, foreign pressure, internal corruption. Yet the seed has been planted, an idea that sovereignty begins not in treaties, but in the earth beneath one's feet. And as the first rays of sunlight strike the crater's edge, one truth emerges with clarity. Burkina Faso has not simply found diamonds. It has found its reflection, and with it, a vision of Africa that finally dares to shine on its own terms.